Hello again, guys. So this time I wanted to do something a little different, not as much looking at patterns or theory about what to play, but instead more about some concepts that I see a lot of people on Facebook and YouTube. They say things on their videos, and I feel like I have to have it qualified for me with some evidence, or at least ask them why they think that. So there's going to be 3 or 4 different topics. Today I'm just going to kind of go through my perspective on these concepts, and I hope you will open your mind a little bit to some of these ideas, because some of them may go completely against things you've heard other professionals say, things that you have always believed and have always played by, used it in your improvising or something. And so when I say it, you're going to be like, no, that just does not ring with me. Just keep an open mind and look at the evidence I present here. A lot of things we know in music theory are open-ended, and they completely depend upon your personal perspective as to how you view the way that these things fit together. That said, I will try to present my evidence here for my own arguments, and hopefully that will sway you, or maybe not. My view on this is kind of that people will just believe whatever they want to believe anyway. I've had arguments with people, heated forum, Facebook arguments with people on some of these topics, and because I'd always believed something, and I even went away from the argument thinking they were wrong, I was right. And then later I looked in a theory textbook, or I looked up what they were talking about. And it takes some time. It takes some time for your mind to sort of realize I could only conceive of what I believed, and so I wasn't allowing it to really sink in. But I don't think this is necessarily wrong. I think it's just how humans are. Presented with new information, we fight it at first in denial, right? And then eventually, as it sinks in, you start to adapt it. And now I call a lot of these opinions that these other people had my opinions. So, the very first thing that is so important to this video is the definitions of words. It is so important that we are thinking about the same thing when we say these words. I see so many people get confused or use the words key, mode, and scale interchangeably. Now, they all share something in common. They all have bits where they overlap, but if we take a detailed, nuanced approach, they are not the same thing. So firstly, scales. What is a scale? A scale is just simply a series of notes. It could have, let's say, as little as 4 or 5 notes. I mean, maybe we can have a 2-note scale. I just haven't seen one or heard of one. Because when scales are so tiny that they're only 2 or 3 notes, we tend to just view those as arpeggios anyway. However, let's just say a scale can be 2 notes to 12 notes. The chromatic scale is all 12 notes in sequence, right? So we have pentatonic scales, hexatonic, heptatonic, all the octatonic scales. But it's important to not confuse them. Scales are not the same as modes. Modes use a scale, but a mode is a separate concept. Keys use a scale, but a key is a separate concept. So now getting into talking about the differences between these two, we're talking about tonality versus modality, or another way that we could say the same thing is tonal harmony versus modal harmony. One thing that really bothered me that I heard lately, and I hear it a lot, especially from guitarists, is that Ionian is the exact same thing as the major key. Well, it can't be, because a mode and a key aren't the same thing, and they're used harmonically entirely different. So people will say, Ionian is the same thing as the major scale. Well, let's break that one down a little bit. The Ionian scale is the same scale as the major scale. That is a correct statement. But that does not mean that the Ionian mode is the same as the major key. The difference here really relies on the way that we use the notes within a given scale. In modal harmony, the progressions tend to be more meandering. So there isn't really a clear dominant to tonic movement that happens like in tonality. Or another possibility for modal harmony is sometimes we have what's called a pedal point. We have a pedal note, the root note, being held over top of the entire piece. For a great example of this, you can look down below. I will link Rick Beato playing progressions in Ionian. And if you notice, when he plays Ionian, he's playing in C Ionian. He always holds C in his left hand. So he's playing the C chord with a C on the root, and then he moves to the G chord with a C on the root. If we think about what is a G over C, really, the notes that we would have would be C, G, B, D. So that gives us a root, a fifth, a major seventh, and a ninth. So we have essentially a major ninth chord, no third. So we could almost say G over C is just another version of a C chord. And this is what I mean about the Ionian mode doesn't really leave. It doesn't really do much or move. 95% of music that we listen to is tonal, meaning it's in a major key or a minor key. We could name progressions till the cows come home. 1 5 6 4, 6 4 1 5, 1 flat 7 flat 6 major 5, the Andalusian cadence. 1 6 4 5, the 50s progression. Almost all of pop music, when we use those 4 chords of pop, we're making tonal progressions. We are in major keys or minor keys. We are not in Ionian or Aeolian. Those words specifically are reserved for very specific cases in music. Because everyone hurries their learning through the modes and they just want to get the concept so badly, they just say, oh, okay, so Ionian's the major scale, I don't even need to think about it. But when you get to an advanced level of harmony, you do need to think about it. It isn't saying the same thing. So for some further examples on this, I'll go to the internet. First, the funny thing is, I find, what is the Ionian mode? The Ionian mode is the first of 7 modes of the major scale. That's true. The next sentence. In fact, it's exactly the same as the major scale and just another name for that scale. Even here we have a problem. Yes, the Ionian scale and the major scale are the same, but what did they do? They equated the Ionian mode with the Ionian scale, and that is not saying the same thing. The Ionian mode is not another name for the major scale. The Ionian scale is. Okay, I know this seems pedantic, but it's important. Okay, so then I click on this, what is the difference between C major and C Ionian? And this question that was asked. I think there are a couple of pertinent answers here. So most upvoted answer here, the difference is simple. When you're talking about the major scale, you're talking in a tonal context. And when you're talking about Ionian, you're talking in a modal context. You won't hear anybody use Ionian to describe a collection of pitches unless it's being used in a modal context. I'm not going to explain all the differences as this answer does, but I'll explain the biggest, which is how the harmony of each is approached. When you're talking in a tonal context, major scale, minor scale, you're talking about functional harmony, and the harmony resolves around the tonic-dominant relationship and takes advantage of the leading tone to establish a tonal center. When talking about something in C major, you'll see most cadences will either be half and on a dominant, which is G in C, or perfect, go from 5 to 1. And the progressions will be taking you either to or from the tonic. When you're talking in a modal context, you're perceiving a home note, but the harmony is a lot more open and not defined by the tonic-dominant relationship. Although in Ionian and Lydian, it will happen sometimes due to the leading tone being included in the mode. Okay, that's basically what I've already said. Modal progressions are greatly influenced by the melody, and the progressions are much more background than actually being used to drive the piece. Great. We got a corroboration. Here's another decent answer. Let's see, I'll skip around a little bit. I think in our current times we would say they are the same. See other answers. Really the answer is yes, but no. So here he talks about how Lydian was the original Gregorian chant mode. So then they actually developed Ionian from Lydian. We actually don't even know what Ionian specifically was in the Greek scales because it was made up by medieval Europeans. There are only loose academic ideas. Okay, that's interesting. So, first and foremost, to define common chord movements in Ionian versus C major is denying the fact that Ionian stems from pure counterpoint and voice leading. Yes, in modern contexts, we think of modal harmony. However, if you dive into the works of, say, Palestrina, you will see how different he uses the Ionian and how different it is from a major scale. The major scale indicated tonality, and often the shifting of tonality more in line with our modern ear. So right now, as you can see from the answers, there may not be a huge difference between C major and C Ionian. However, historically, the difference is substantial. That's all I'm saying. The difference is substantial. I will also include links down below for all of these things that I'm reading. So now that we've gotten through that point, it's sort of understandable that untrained musicians would kind of confuse the two. I mean, this is very nuanced kind of stuff, you know what I mean? But as I keep saying, I believe nuance is important. In fact, one could argue all of music theory is nuance. If you just said, it's a sound and another sound. I mean, that is true. If you're not going to analyze it and you're not going to use specific words to describe what's happening, then what's the point? Music theory is about nuance. And this is the exact point. I'm telling you, I had arguments about this exact same thing with people, came away from it and said, nope, Ionian is just major scale. Stop trying to be confusing. And then I found theory books and read about tonality versus modality historically and realized, they've actually got a point. So we just have to open our minds and be prepared to change the way we think about things. Another reason that I have seen for the confusion between a key and a mode is some people, if you'll notice, a song like Sweet Home Alabama is in D mixolydian, and some people, Adam Neely's video, he says it's in the key of D. Now, that makes you think, like, what does he mean it's in the key of D? It's in D mixolydian. It's not in D major or D minor. So I think where this idea kind of stems from is sheet music. Some people will write D mixolydian in a D major key signature. Now, for me, I think more relatively, so for me, if I were going to write D mixolydian, I would want to write it in the key signature of G, E minor, because that's going to share all the same notes, and therefore I won't have to use as many accidentals. To me, the whole point of a key signature is not to tell you what the tonic is, it's to have as little accidentals as possible. Otherwise, why even have a signature? Honestly, just write everything out with all the sharps and flats. The whole point of a signature is to have less accidentals. I mean, unless someone can present another reason why key signatures exist, that seems to me to be the point, rather than to tell you what the home note is, which you can usually figure out looking at the first and last bar of the sheet of music pretty quickly. But so, with these types of people, they've gotten used to, they'll write D mixolydian with the key signature of D major. And you're thinking, okay, well, D major has an F sharp and a C sharp, but D mixolydian is going to have a C natural. It still has the F sharp, but it's going to have a C natural. Yes, they will write all the sheet music, and every single C sharp that comes along, they will natural it back to a C again. Naturalize, natural it, I don't know the proper verb there. Now, to me, that seems silly, because it's like, why even have a signature then if you're going to have to natural every single seventh that comes along? But for them, they feel that the signature is more important to tell you the tonicity, the tonic note, than anything else. So same would, that was a major mode example, the same would happen with minor modes for them. If something was in D Dorian, instead of using the key signature of CA minor like I would, with no sharps, no flats, D Dorian, they would instead want to see that with a key signature of D minor, which would have one flat. And then every time that B flat comes along, they would natural it back to a regular B. It's just the way some people learned. But I do think that idea can cause people to say something like, oh, it's in the key of D minor, when it's obviously not. It's in a modal context. Okay, now the next little bone to pick has to do with a Victor Wooten video that has become crazily popular. and has been shared around by many people. Now, it is basically Victor Wooten saying that there is definitively 30 keys. Going by the circle of fifths, he's not wrong. He's looking at the circle of fifths and he's saying there's 30 keys. Now, mind you, he just learned this concept from someone there at the camp. He admits that and has his mind blown, I guess, by seeing these enharmonic keys that he has been disregarding his whole playing. The reason he's been disregarding them is because Victor Wooten probably doesn't play with sheet music that much. So to him, he doesn't need to think about C flat. He's just always thinking B, and that's it. That's all he needs. So the first point there is just that if you don't read sheet music, this kind of opinion, it's a writing device. Enharmonic keys are a writing device. We'll get to that, more on that later. First, I want to put my own thing out there, and I want to say I'm going to try to prove, for my opinion, I know there's different answers for it, but I'm going to try to prove there are 24 keys. 12 major, 12 minor, that's it. And I want to say it actually there are 24 real keys, and I want to define real. That's important. Real to me means sonic, physical vibrations, sound. There are 24 physical keys that you can hear in the real world. Now, some people would say, well, sheet music is real. I mean, you can read the C flat on the paper and therefore it is real. And to that I say, yeah, I mean, the paper's real. I think it's more like language though. It's a human construct that allows people to read sheet music. So C flat is a writing device. The only person who needs C flat is someone who's reading sheet music. And even then it's arguable, because why not use B and have 5 sharps instead of C flat and have 7? I know it has relation to do with modulations and such. Yeah. Basically, if you modulate from a flat key, you want to end up in another flat key so that it's less confusing to the performer. I get these concepts. But then to those people, I would kind of say, well, then why not all or nothing? Because there are all these theoretical keys that don't really exist, even though I could write the key signatures for them and they would exist. They aren't canonized in the musical lingo. And the reason is because when you get to 7 sharps or 7 flats, after that there's nowhere to go. There's only 7 notes in the scale, so you have to start double sharping, double flatting. And you know what? Performers don't like that, because that's confusing. So it messes up their whole reading-writing device, right? So just further proving that it is a writing and reading device and nothing more. I want to put up a circle of fifths here, and we can kind of look at it and we can see. I actually had to look really hard just to find a circle of fifths that had the enharmonic minor keys. For whatever reason, people really like G sharp minor more than they like A flat minor. I don't know why exactly. But so I found one that has all of them there. But if you notice, we have 15 notes featured. Okay, one of those notes is C flat, which arguably we could say is maybe even not a note that most people would call out. So we have 14 regular notes, and then if we add the 3 that are missing off of there, we get 17 actual notes that people typically think about. And then if we say, okay, C flat is valid, well then we need to say that B sharp, E sharp, and F flat are valid as well. Because if C flat is valid, the other 3 weird ones, I'm calling these the weird ones, has to be valid as well. So to me, it's just all or nothing. Either accept all the keys with all their double sharps or triple sharps or whatever, or maybe just the 12, like I'm saying to you. Does that mean that I prefer F sharp over G flat or something like that? I mean, I guess if I'm honest with myself, I do prefer, as a guitarist, I prefer F sharp over G flat as far as if someone's calling it out. But would it mess me up? Not really. No, I am pretty enharmonically fluent on the instrument. I don't care which one you call it. But it is always weird when someone says like A sharp or D sharp, like those are just ones that they aren't on our major keys, so they just feel weird for someone to say A sharp major. That's a theoretical key. But there's nothing wrong with it other than the fact that it has double sharps. And performers don't like double sharps. So for a final example there, I wanted to take the example of if you had sheet music in B and you had sheet music in C flat. Imagine these aren't famous songs. They're not composers that anyone could recognize because they're completely original, brand new, composed by AI or whoever, whatever. And you had some written in C flat and some written in B. And then you took a trained musician, I don't care how trained they are or how not, even if you took someone with perfect pitch, mind you, and you had them sit in a chair and just purely listen and then guess, is this sheet music written in B or in C flat? You would get a 50-50 coin toss because there's no way to tell. They are the same in the 12-tet system. That's an important caveat. In the 12-tet system, they are exactly the same. And most people would probably just say B, even if they had perfect pitch, because, I mean, who's used to saying C flat? It's just not as normal to go for that one first. So I hope that kind of concludes my why enharmonic keys aren't really valid to me as being real. I understand how they work in the writing of sheet music, but I don't consider writing devices to be the same as real-world physical vibrations. That's just my definition. Okay, and then this means for us that I'm to the last point. And this is actually the point that I feel like a lot of people will learn something from. And I've got theory textbook photos to show here. Actually, it's this tonal harmony right up here behind me that they've been pulled out of. And that piece of information is that the true minor key is not equivalent to Aeolian. Now, we already went over this, right? You're like, well, yeah, you said Ionian mode isn't necessarily the same as the major key, so it must be true that the Aeolian mode isn't necessarily the same as the minor key. And that's correct, but they're not even the same because there are extra notes implied in the minor key. Now before, at the beginning of the video, we said the Ionian scale uses the same scale as the major scale, and we were happy with that statement. That's actually what makes Ionian and major scale so confusing, actually, is the fact that they are the exact same. But what I'm saying is, we can not necessarily say the Aeolian scale is the same as the minor key. We could say the statement, the Aeolian scale is the exact same intervals, notes, as the natural minor scale. That is a true statement. The natural minor scale has 7 notes. But as we know, in minor keys, the harmonic scale and the melodic scale play an extremely important role. They're not just exotic scales you can borrow from. They are inherent in what we call minor tonality. This is to say that the minor scale should be a 9 conceived of as a 9-note scale with the flat 6 and 6, flat 7 and 7 being variable. Here I will show the textbook evidence of this and the pages and everything. You can look for it yourself. And next here I will show other pages from the same book. They show all the common triads, and because we now are thinking about we can use up to 9 notes to make these triads instead of just the 7, you actually get a lot more triad possibilities. And as it actually says in the sheet itself, is basically that all the important triads in the minor key, the root notes of those triads are all pulled from the harmonic minor instead of from the natural minor. I'll show you the diatonic sevenths as well. Maybe I'll try to include these images below as well. And so this is a big problem for a lot of people because they're so used to, no, Aeolian is the minor key. Well, that's already, as we talked about, an incorrect statement because a mode isn't a key. But then also it's even more incorrect because there's actually more notes that are implied. So they're like, no, you're just only using the harmonic scale when you're doing the major 5, man. The rest of it's in natural minor. It's not really true. The harmonic, melodic, and natural are being implied at all points during minor tonality. This was actually another argument that I saw. I did not participate in, but I saw an argument with a guy who was trying to tell people this, and they were laughing him off. Multiple people were like, this guy has no idea what he's talking about, and he was probably even posting evidence, and they didn't care. And honestly, I was like, I don't know about this. That doesn't sound right to me. But it's because it's all based on what we had previously thought, and it's really hard to change that. It takes some time. And I got this theory textbook and I was like, oh, this is exactly what that guy was talking about. And now I realize they're just not things that people want to hear because they're very deep, very nuanced concepts that you have to really understand a certain level of music theory before you'll even want to hear these. So that to me says because the minor key has 9 notes in it and is completely different from any of the other keys or scales or whatever. To me, the minor key is its own unique thing. You can no longer just say A minor is C major because A minor implies 2 extra notes that C major doesn't imply. So to me, that's like A minor is its own thing and C major is its own thing. So to me, there are 2 keys per sonic note. So there are 12 sonic pitches, and each of those has 2 variations, a major and a minor possibility of key. So to me, that's where I get the 24 keys. So I want to leave you with this idea too, which is that when I'm teaching beginners, I will teach them some of these things. I will tell them, yeah, Ionian's the major key and Aeolian's the minor key, and I'll perpetuate this sort of myth sometimes. But maybe sometimes I'll throw in the caveat of like, I'm going to tell you this right now, but just know as a placeholder, we will change it later. It's not totally true, but this will work for you right now. And I think that that's the part that could be missing, is if we just keep perpetuating the same ideas with people over and over, then we create these echo chambers on the internet. Tons of people have guitar-based websites, theory-based websites that are visited all the time by a bunch of people, and they are still perpetuating these same myths on those websites. And I'm not saying it's not useful for a time, but if we want to get to a really high level, we at some point have to accept the truth. We have to see things differently. And I hope that we didn't burst your bubble too hard here, and that maybe some of this will soak in. Right now you might be mad. Put your comments down there. Let's talk about it, and I'll try to provide more evidence, I suppose. But I just see these little things that just sort of rub me the wrong way, or just hear someone say something so casually, like Ionian is the major key. And it's just like, it's technically not. And it's not bad to say that if you know that you're bending the rules in order to just get someone to learn something. But if you don't know, then you should know. Hopefully this was fun. Next time we'll probably be back to lessons. I'm planning on another lesson soon on sus chords and their theory behind them. But until next time, take it easy.